Welcome to Griffonomics. Imagine you are driving down the highway minding your own business, and you look at the cars passing you.
Right.
Statistically, in some high-risk states, 1 in every 5 of those drivers does not have auto insurance.
Wow, 1 in 5.
Yeah, 1 in 5. If they hit you, you are the one left paying the bill through soaring premiums. It's a massive, incredibly expensive public crisis. But what if an artificial intelligence network could read every single license plate on that highway, cross-reference it with a statewide database in like milliseconds, and automatically force those drivers into compliance without a single police officer pulling anyone over?
I mean, that is the promise of deploying AI into public infrastructure. It sounds like this sleek, totally frictionless Silicon Valley dream. But the reality of dragging massive government bureaucracies into the digital age is far more complicated. And frankly, it's a lot messier.
Which brings us to our mission for today. We are taking a deep dive into a huge stack of sources, so Q1 2026 SEC filings, the 10K, 10Q, earnings call transcripts, and some strategic analyst reports.
All focused on Rekor Systems.
Exactly, Rekor Systems. Or REKR for the ticker. Our goal here is to generate a really granular strategic report and investment roadmap of Rekor's pivot from this legacy hardware provider into an AI-powered software model. For you listening, whether you are an investor meticulously analyzing balance sheets or you are just, fascinated by how AI actually intersects with the real world of concrete and courtrooms, this is really a masterclass in reading between the lines of corporate financials.
It absolutely is.
We are going to find out if REKR is experiencing a brilliant operational inflection or if they are accelerating into a terminal liquidity trap.
Right. And to really understand the precarious position Rekor is in right now, we have to start by looking inward. Before they can revolutionize the highways, they had to completely gut their own house just to survive this transition.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I was looking at their Q1 filings, and the restructuring costs spiked massively. What exactly were they doing behind the scenes between late 2025 and early 2026?
Well, they were basically taking a chainsaw to their payroll. Management executed a 16% headcount reduction.
That's a huge cut.
Yeah, it eliminated roughly 45 positions. And they didn't just, trim around the edges. They shut down entire legacy operations.
Which completely explains why their Q1 financials look so incredibly ugly on the surface. It reminds me of a major house renovation. You decide to upgrade all your plumbing to make the house more efficient, right?
Oh, for sure.
But for the first 3 months, your house looks significantly worse than when you started. Your bank account is bleeding, you have literal holes smashed into the drywall, and there is dust everywhere. That was Q1 for Rekor.
Yeah, the financials reflect that perfectly, because the cost savings from firing those 45 people, those were completely masked by the severance packages and the exit fees.
Right, like the filings show they absorbed a $278,000 separation cost just for winding down their REKR Tel Aviv operation. And then they took another $117,000 lease termination penalty just to exit a facility in Plano, Texas. Why were those specific cuts so necessary for them?
Because you simply cannot build a lean, scalable AI software business if you are still paying rent and salaries for fragmented legacy global offices they no longer serve your core edge computing mission. Tel Aviv and Plano were remnants of this older operational structure.
Ah, I see.
So by taking the painful financial hit to shut them down in Q1, management is shedding that legacy hardware skin. They are projecting what they call a stark drop in expenses to become fully visible in Q2.
Once all those severance checks and lease penalties actually clear the books, so they stop the bleeding. And while they are taking a chainsaw to expenses, they are simultaneously executing this massive shift in their product mix. The sources show their high-margin recurring software revenue surged 28% year over year.
Which is fantastic growth for that segment.
Yeah, and software now accounts for 64% of their total revenue. And that shift successfully drove a massive 5-point gross margin expansion, bringing their total gross margin up to 53%.
It's a totally different financial profile now.
But I have to ask, is this 53% margin a sustainable new reality? Or is it just a temporary accounting illusion because they stopped paying rent in Texas?
No, the evidence strongly points to it being sustainable because it reflects a fundamental change in their entire business model. They have pivoted away from selling metal boxes to what is known as data as a service, or DaaS.
Explain that mechanism for us. How does DaaS actually change the fundamental economics of the company?
Think of it as the difference between selling someone a DVD player versus selling them a Netflix subscription.
Oh, Oh, okay. That's a good way to look at it.
Right. In the old model, Rekor sold hardware, like cameras, physical sensors. That inherently carries lower margins because you have to manufacture physical goods, ship them, deal with the global supply chains.
And physical wear and tear.
Exactly. But with the data as a service model, they install the AI software and the edge sensors once. From that point on, it costs them practically nothing to process and deliver a new data stream to a client. So that 53% gross margin. That is the sound of massive operational leverage. The software algorithm is doing all the heavy lifting, not physical labor.
Which brings us back to that staggering statistic about uninsured drivers that we started with. Because a lean company still needs fresh cash flow, and Rekor seems to be finding it by targeting highly specific, localized public crises.
Yes, they are.
Let's look at Oklahoma. Rekor locked in a $16.8 million agreement to serve as the operational backbone for the state's Uninsured Vehicle Enforcement Diversion Program, or UVD.
And this is just a perfect showcase of the DaaS model in action. Rekor deploys its sensors across the state highways. As cars drive past, the AI captures the license plates and instantly cross-references them with the Oklahoma State Insurance Database.
Milliseconds, right?
Milliseconds. And if a match comes back showing the vehicle is uninsured, the system automatically triggers a notice to the registered owner. It provides them with a compliance path to get insurance and pay a fee to avoid going to court.
It essentially automates compliance.
Completely.
And the reason Rekor can rely on these expanding margins is because once these contracts are signed, they act as an enormous defensive moat. Let's look at the Georgia Department of Transportation contract, GDOT. This was awarded in late 2025, and it is their largest statewide contract ever, with a minimum baseline value of $50 million.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
But that $50 million baseline is impressive on its own. The real golden ticket hidden in this contract is something called a cooperative purchasing clause.
Yeah, I saw that in the analyst reports. How does that clause actually work in practice for a state government?
Well, anyone who has ever sold to the government knows that the request for a proposal, the RFP process, is just an absolute nightmare.
Oh, yeah. Years of paperwork.
Exactly. It takes months, sometimes years, of bidding, bureaucratic reviews, and administrative friction. A cooperative purchasing clause allows local Georgia cities, county governments, municipal planning organizations to simply piggyback on the state's existing contract.
So they don't have to do their own RFP.
Right. They can buy Rekor's AI services directly, completely bypassing their own local, lengthy, competitive bidding processes.
They just get to skip the line entirely.
Yep. And management expects that by removing that administrative friction, local municipalities will jump on board so fast that this clause alone could double the contract's total value to over $100 million.
That is staggering, and it really illustrates the switching costs inherent in this model. Think about Rekor's legacy competitors. They sell physical assets to the government. You know, things like pneumatic tubes stretched across intersections or induction loops that are literally physically cut into the pavement.
Right, the old school stuff.
Exactly. That leaves the Department of Transportation with the headache of maintenance, tracking warranties, and sending field crews out into dangerous highway traffic just to fix a broken sensor. The government is essentially buying a chore.
And under the DaaS model, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the government agency isn't buying the hardware. They're just buying the insights. REKR manages the physical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Once a state agency integrates this clean, automated data dashboard into their daily workflow, the idea of ripping it all out and going back to managing physical fleets of pavement sensors is just, it's operationally unthinkable.
The switching costs are astronomically high.
Astronomically.
So if we look at the board right now, they have built this absolute fortress in traffic monitoring. The switching costs are immense. The state contracts in Georgia and Oklahoma are locked in. It sounds like an invincible company. But relying solely on departments of transportation is inherently risky because government budgets move at a glacial pace.
Very glacial.
To combat this, the sources indicate Rekor is attempting a major vertical diversification. They are launching a new product in Q3 2026 called GoSecure.
Yeah, this is a fascinating pivot. It's being developed by their newly formed subsidiary, REKR Labs, which is chaired by MIT professor Sanjay Sarma. GoSecure is a highly targeted play into evidence authentication for the legal and insurance sectors.
And the origin story for this is wild. A customer approached them in 2024 and asked a frankly terrifying question. They said, can public safety video used as evidence in a court of law be deepfaked?
And Rekor's engineering team essentially replied, yes, absolutely, but we can build an AI to catch it.
Which is such a bold claim.
It is, but the technological approach they took is what separates them from the pack. Competitors in the deepfake detection space generally rely on probabilistic models. They feed a video into an algorithm, and it outputs a guess. Something like, there is an 85% probability this video is AI generated.
Which might work for a social media platform warning label, but a defense attorney is going to tear an 85% probability to shreds in front of a jury.
Precisely. That is precisely why GoSecure utilizes a deterministic model instead. It relies on mathematical certainty down to a single frame of video to cryptographically verify the camera of origin, the exact timestamp, and the GPS location.
So it doesn't guess at all.
No, it proves the evidence is definitively authentic, or it proves that it has been tampered with. This opens up entirely new target markets. We're talking prosecutors, defense attorneys, courts, and massive insurance companies investigating fraudulent claims.
Okay, here is where I have to heavily push back on this strategy, though.
Okay.
Because they are a company that counts cars on highways for the Department of Transportation. Now they want to fight deepfakes in courtrooms. That is a massive leap in core competency. It feels like severe shiny object syndrome to me. Are they genuinely diversifying, or are they just getting distracted by sexy MIT tech when they really should be laser focused on their core infrastructure business? I mean, they are a cash-strapped company. They cannot afford a vanity project right now.
That is a totally valid concern, and honestly, it is the first question any institutional investor would ask. The defense for this move lies in the corporate structure.
How so?
By transferring this intellectual property into a newly created, isolated subsidiary Rekor Labs, with its own separate board of managers, they are attempting to shield the core roadway intelligence team from the distraction. They are aggressively hunting for new revenue footprints in the private sector, specifically targeting law enforcement and insurance, because those entities have drastically faster sales cycles than state governments. They need revenue that moves faster than a highway bill.
Okay, let's take a hard pivot right there, because you just mentioned they need revenue.
Desperately.
If the data as a service model is this impenetrable fortress, and the $100 million Georgia contract is the ultimate blueprint, and GoSecure is this brilliant technological diversification, why are the actual top-line revenue numbers practically flatlining? We really need a reality check here.
We do, because the financial forensics paint a very different picture than the technological narrative. If you rewind to Rekor's May 2024 investor presentation, management was touting a 40% historical compound annual growth rate. They were explicitly projecting that the company would reach profitability by the end of 2024.
But the 2026 reality is glaringly different. Top-line revenue essentially stalled out. It went from $9.8 million in Q1 of 2024 to just $10.26 million in Q1 of 2026.
Barely moved.
Barely moved. That is 2 full years of practically zero top-line growth. And because customer adoption speeds were so much slower than management aggressively projected back then, they were forced to take a massive $10.2 million impairment charge in 2024.
Let's translate what an impairment charge actually means for our listeners.
Yeah, please do.
In accounting terms, an impairment charge is management waving a white flag. It's them officially admitting to the market that an asset on their balance sheet is no longer worth what they previously claimed. They thought the market would adopt their software at a certain speed. They valued their assets based on that assumption, and they were completely wrong.
Ouch.
Yeah, taking a $10.2 million hit is a brutal acknowledgement of that miscalculation.
And a miscalculation of that magnitude does not go unpunished in the boardroom.
Not at all. This stagnation has triggered a significant evolution in corporate governance. The board of directors is actively shifting its composition away from academic figures and hedge fund oversight, and heavily pivoting toward directors with hardcore experience in commercial scaling.
Right. The filings show 3 separate directors are departing the board in 2026 alone.
Exactly. They're clearing out the theorists and bringing in the operators.
But I'm still trying to square the circle here. How can their top-line revenue remain flat at around $10 million when we just talked about them signing $50 million statewide contracts in Georgia and Oklahoma? Where is the money?
What's fascinating here is the hidden friction of selling scalable software to a massive bureaucracy. While the contracted backlog, which is the total theoretical value of all the deals they have won, looks incredible on a slide deck, the accounting reality is punishing. These are multi-year data-as-a-service contracts. Revenue must be recognized ratably.
Meaning they can't just dump the whole contract value onto the income statement on day one.
Exactly. Ratable recognition means the revenue is spread out evenly over the entire life of the contract, which could be anywhere from 3 to 7 years.
So the cash just trickles in.
Just a slow drip, month by month. And that slow drip is compounded by the fact that they are dealing with government agencies. Routine 60 to 120-day billing lags are industry standard. When a startup signs a massive corporate SaaS deal, the cash hits the bank relatively quickly. When you sign a deal with a state DOT, you wait.
Wow. And that devastating delay in getting paid brings us to the absolute elephant in the room, REKR's liquidity wall. They have this massive $282 million contract backlog sitting there, but they are running out of cash today. Despite receiving a $15 million equity infusion in December 2025, they ended Q1 2026 with only $12.2 million in the bank.
Which is frighteningly low.
It really is, and that critically low cash balance triggered a severe going concern warning from their auditors in the 10Q filing.
And for anyone unfamiliar with SEC filings, a going concern warning is the loudest alarm bell an auditor can ring. It is the accounting firm explicitly stating that, based on the current cash burn rate, the company does not have enough liquidity to fund its operations for the next 12 months.
It means the company is at genuine risk of insolvency if something drastic does not change. And making matters infinitely worse, they are suffocating under the weight of their own capital structure. To finance this pivot, they took on Series A prime revenue sharing notes. These notes carry a highly punitive 13.25% fixed interest rate. Why would any management team agree to debt terms that resemble a credit card?
Desperation. Just pure desperation and a lack of options.
Yeah.
When you are an unproven company trying to pivot from hardware to software and your revenue is lagging, traditional commercial banks will not lend to you at favorable rates. You are forced to go to alternative lenders and take on expensive Shark Tank-level debt just to keep the lights on and pay your engineers while you wait for those government contracts to mature.
And the cost of keeping those lights on is staggering. That 13.25% debt cost them nearly $500,000, $497,000 in Q1 alone, just in interest payments. So what does this all mean for Rekor? It is like holding a winning lottery ticket, that $282 million backlog, but you are legally not allowed to cash it for 5 years.
Right.
Meanwhile, your rent is due today, and you are bleeding out from a 13.25% loan.
The race to profitability is a desperate sprint against that exact dynamic. CEO Robert Berman has publicly stated that hitting EBITDA neutrality by late Q2 or early Q3 is, and I quote, "not a wish, it is where the math takes us."
Let's define EBIT neutrality for the audience real quick.
Sure, EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Hitting EBITDA neutrality means the core, day-to-day operations of the business are finally breaking even before you factor in the financial plumbing like that toxic debt. Management believes that because they slash those 45 jobs and achieve that 53% gross margin, the math will finally tip into the green by Q3.
But even if the operational math works and they hit EBITDA neutrality, they still have that crushing 13.25% debt bleeding them dry below the operating line.
Which is why management's ultimate survival plan hinges on a massive refinancing effort. They are desperately trying to use the visible recurring revenue from the Georgia-Oklahoma contracts as collateral to refinance those 13.25% notes.
So they want to swap out the bad debt for better debt.
Basically, if they can point to the $282 million backlog and convince a new lender to give them cheaper debt, they can lower their cost of capital, stop the massive interest payments, and buy the vital breathing room they need to survive until the government cash flow finally catches up.
So bringing all of these complex threads together to answer our mission statement today, is Rekor the ultimate scalable AI playbook, or are we simply looking at a terminal liquidity trap?
Well, the bull case is incredibly compelling, and it is entirely grounded in operational leverage. That 53% adjusted gross margin proves that their AI model works beautifully at scale. The $100 million potential of the Georgia DOT blueprint, combined with the fact that 64% of their revenue is now high-margin software, shows they have successfully transitioned into a highly scalable SaaS enterprise armed with immense switching costs.
Right, the tech works.
The technology works, and the deepfake authentication is genuinely innovative.
But the bear case is that ticking clock. The top-line growth has been functionally flat for 2 years. The cash flows are severely delayed by bureaucratic procurement lags. The explicit going concern warning is a glaring red flag for any investor, and that punishing 13.25% debt burden represents a terminal risk. If they fail to refinance that debt, all the operational leverage and MIT algorithms in the world will not save them from insolvency.
It raises a profound question about the nature of investing in this specific space. This is not consumer software where a viral app can generate millions in cash overnight. This is the ultimate test of survival mathematics. The contracts are signed. The only question left is whether their balance sheet can physically outlast the glacial pace of government payment cycles.
It really emphasizes for you, the listener, that investing in infrastructure AI requires an entirely different framework. It isn't just about identifying the most deterministic neural networks or the sleekest code. It requires an iron stomach for bureaucratic sales cycles. And it requires exceptionally deep pockets to survive the lag.
It forces investors to look past the technology and focus relentlessly on the capital structure.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. As artificial intelligence continues to push out of agile, fast-moving private enterprises and begins to embed itself into massive, slow-moving public infrastructure projects who will actually dominate the next decade, will the ultimate winners be the companies that engineer the most groundbreaking, revolutionary technology, or will they simply be the companies with balance sheets strong enough to survive the agonizing weight of government procurement?
That is the defining question for anyone putting capital to work in this sector.
Risk-afined, portfolio protected.